The presentation we're going to run through today will cover three elements: the nature of the structure of the organisation that delivers a social pedagogic model. We will then talk about, Colin will talk about the nature of the practice that is appropriate within that organisation. And then Ignaz will talk about the practical experience of running that model within actual home with actual children. Does that sound reasonable? Come on, yeah, much better than the last audience. They were all said bye by now. We will introduce this chap during the presentation. I deliberately introduce him just to allow some reflection. One of the things that we try and model within our organisation is content and then pause, so that take the opportunity as we run through the slides to be grateful that I stopped and then just reflect. I noticed, Colin, you went rather quickly through one of the pauses. I haven't got time to reflect properly. But the first slide is we're living in interesting times. I don't know whether you're aware, but there's a Chinese curse, may you live in interesting times. In April 2009, we had a cross-party select committee report which said we need a care system based on good relationships. I find that interesting, not because we have a requirement for good relationships. I find it interesting because we have to state that, and that isn't the default condition. Within the sector, we've all experienced a cycle where we've been risk averse, that we've been inspected, that we've been looking to perform, and that perhaps we've lost as a sector the need to develop a focus on forming relationships with young people and taking the role of corporate parenting seriously. And that is the nature and underpinning to this slide presentation we're doing today. We have an ongoing evaluation of social pedagogy. When I talk about social pedagogy, I talk about the context within which pedagogic services can be delivered, which is both, as I say, the organisational context, the nature of the practice model, and the staff. A practice model. Within Five Rivers, we start with the leadership of the organisation. If you don't actually have a clear intent, then how can the organisation deliver that intent? So our mission is turning children's lives around through high-impact sector-leading services. I won't explore that, but I'd be very happy to. We do have a stand or I'll talk to people about that afterwards. So that for us has a fundamental positioning shot at how our practice is developed. We underpin that because we're looking to develop a social pedagogic framework with 5 principles. The first principle is assessment. Feel free to read the text, but in principle it says that we will not engage in an intervention unless we've established the intervention is appropriate. So we start off by having assessment, and Colin will explore that a little bit more in the next section. Second principle of our model is training. That we wouldn't undertake assessment unless we believed we had an intervention that our staff were competent in. So that all staff need to be trained and developed in a practice model that supports the identified needs that the assessment has exposed. Principle 3 is staff. Within the sector, within my experience, I've worked with organisations where when you develop the practice model, you find out that your staff, for example, are not inclined towards the tactile element of the job that's required. So we have staff who are uncomfortable with touch. We have staff who are uncomfortable with emotional engagement. And if we're looking to develop a social pedagogic model, we need to be competent and at developing systems that allow us to recruit and retain staff who have all the emotional and physical skill sets as well as the intellectual competency to deliver the model. That's our third principle. Our fourth principle is the environmental context. We are very serious about setting up an organisational culture where the terms and conditions, the working environment, the leadership style, the supervision style, all relate to being supportive of the task that we expect our staff to deliver. And the fifth element is the nature of the structure of the organisation. Within the Five Rivers context, we are delivery as a social enterprise. The reason we do that is that it frees up our staff to optimise the efficiency of the organisation. If we develop surpluses or save money, our staff have the confidence that money is reinvested in the resources and the tasks that they've signed up to within the context of the organisation. A whistle-stop tour, but there are 5 principles of structuring an organisation to support a social pedagogic model. Within that context, we then feel able to deliver the 5 fundamentals, which are our 5 integrated processes. We run crisis intervention because if a young person is presented to us and we're asked to look after them, but we can't see the need, we have to have the facility to allow the young person to manage their behaviours so that we can expose the need, so we can do our assessment, so we can match our services. We have an assessment protocol. We deliver residential care because we believe that some young people's needs are mapped by that resource. We have family placement. Not all young people's needs are that complex. And then we support the other 4 elements with education. We deliberately engage in the complexity of running an integrated service because we believe there's a synergy. That if you do one of those elements well, that informs the other. And that the absence of any one of those means that we don't have a holistic model. Again, very happy to talk about that outside of the session and how do we deliver that and how do we deliver that across the country. But we're not the only ones who have taken that journey. This is a long and complex quote from a guy called Steve Cox, who worked out of Wolverhampton. I don't know whether any of you are aware of the practice model in Wolverhampton, in the local authorities. No? Well, I put his contact details there because Wolverhampton is doing some really good work. And in the last 2 years, they've embraced the integration of their practice model. They now have integrated their CAMS teams, their fostering teams, their education team, and the residential team. They've supported that by a single practice model, which actually, if you wanted to talk to Colin, they happen to use the pillars of parenting. But they've been highly successful. They've managed to move all the young people back into the local authority, apart from 4, that's 4 of 400. And they've matched that fiscal benefit at the same time improving their outcomes, so that they are now either Ofsted excellent or good in all of their residential homes. And some really good work being done. Because they're now integrating their model, they're clear on task, and they've taken the wise step to engage chartered child psychologists to mentor the whole team in a common assessment approach. And I only mention that because I'm not suggesting that we're the only organisation that delivers an integrated model. There are others. We work in partnership with Middlesbrough. The same format is applied, we have the same objectives, the same structure, and within Middlesbrough, we as an organisation run a residential setting, and the CAMS team within Middlesbrough run the assessment. Again, highly successful in the terms obviously tells what it says on the tin. We have 90% of the young people leaving successfully from that system is back to their birth parents or into independent living. We also work independently, and in the last part of the presentation, Ignace will talk to you about how we run an assessment centre in Essex, So that's a whistle-stop tour of presenting the fact that social pedagogy is not a job title, which is a job title, obviously, but it doesn't work in isolation. That in order to deliver a social pedagogic model, you have to consider the whole system, and that we have some experience, as do other organisations, on how to develop that and how to support the practice model. But enough of that now. I'll then pass across to Colin, who's going to talk to you about the content, or you might populate that model with.